The merchant ship Zephyrian Dawn drifted through the void between star systems. Her cargo holds filled with rare, crystalline formations from the mining worlds of Kepler, 442. Captain Vexhai of the Altarian Trade Consortium adjusted his primary viewing stalks, watching the hyperlane exit coordinates with practiced ease. His species had been traversing these routes for over 2 millennia, long before the younger races had even discovered fire. The bridge hummed with quiet efficiency. His navigation officer, a slender Vorthack named Krianel, monitored the quantum positioning arrays while the engineering chief, a bulky Gorvanian called Thunctor, kept watch over the fusion cores from a station below. They had made this run dozens of times before, carrying precious cargo between the established trade worlds of the Galactic Commerce Alliance. Vexai's compound eyes caught a flicker on the long-range sensors. Krianel, what is that signature ahead? The Vorthack's elongated fingers danced across her console, her 4 arms working in perfect coordination. Unknown vessel, Captain. It appears to be primitive. Very primitive. The energy signature suggests chemical propulsion systems. Thunctor's gravelly voice echoed from the engineering deck. Chemical? What kind of backward species still uses chemical rockets for interstellar travel? Vexhai felt his gill slits flutter with curiosity. In his 47 years of commanding trade vessels, he had encountered many species at various levels of technological development, but chemical propulsion in deep space was practically suicide. The distances between stars required either fusion drives at minimum or preferably quantum tunnel drives for any reasonable journey time. Bring us closer for visual contact, he ordered. Reduce speed to 1/4 thrust. The main viewers shifted as their ship adjusted course. What they saw defied logical explanation. A small, boxy vessel no larger than an escape pod tumbled slowly through space, clearly damaged. Scorch marks blackened its hull, and what appeared to be crude solar panels hung at odd angles, some completely torn away. Captain, Krianel's voice carried a note of disbelief. I'm reading one life sign aboard that vessel. The being inside should have died weeks ago from oxygen depletion, but somehow the atmospheric readings show breathable air remaining. Vexhai studied the primitive craft more carefully. Its construction seemed almost laughably basic by galactic standards. Thick metal plating welded together with visible seam lines, external components that should have been integrated into the hull design, and what looked like actual windows instead of proper viewing ports. Yet somehow, against all odds, it had survived in the harsh environment of deep space. Open a communication channel, he decided. Let's see if whoever is in there can respond. Static filled the bridge speakers for several moments before a voice came through, speaking in a language none of them recognized. The universal translator worked furiously to decode the unfamiliar syntax and grammar patterns. Unknown vessel. This is Commander Sarah Chun of the Earth ship Perseverance. If anyone can hear this transmission, please respond. I am in need of immediate assistance. My ship has suffered critical system failures, and I am running low on supplies. Vexhai exchanged glances with his crew. Earth was not a planet in any of their stellar cartographic databases. This is Captain Vexhai of the merchant vessel Zephyrian Dawn. Commander Chun, your species is unknown to us. From what system do you originate? Sol system, approximately 47 light years from my current position. I was part of humanity's first interstellar exploration mission when my ship was damaged by micrometeorite impacts. I've been drifting for 6 months. 6 months. Vexhai's gill slits fluttered again, this time with amazement. No species could survive 6 months in such a primitive vessel. The psychological strain alone would drive most beings into cataleptic shock, not to mention the physical impossibility of maintaining life support for so long with such basic technology. Commander Chun, we are bringing you aboard our vessel. Prepare for tractor beam acquisition. Thank you, Captain Vexhai. I thank you. The emotion in the human's voice was unmistakable, even through the universal translator. Vexhai had heard that tone before from countless beings he had rescued over the years, but something about this human's gratitude struck him as deeper somehow. The Zephyrian Dawn's tractor beam engaged, drawing the primitive craft into their cargo bay. Vexhai made his way down to the docking level, accompanied by Krianel and their medical officer, Dr. Zilfan, an elderly Nexarian whose healing abilities were renowned throughout the sector. The cargo bay doors sealed, and the atmospheric processors quickly filled the space with breathable air. When the primitive vessel's hatch opened, Vexhai got his first look at a human being. Commander Sarah Chun was smaller than he had expected, standing barely half his height on two legs instead of the four that most civilized species possessed. Her skin was a light brown color, and dark hair framed a face with just two forward-facing eyes. She wore a bulky environmental suit that looked hand-stitched rather than manufactured, and her movements suggested both exhaustion and careful control. "Captain Vexhai?" she asked, removing her helmet to reveal more of her unusual features. "I am he. This is my navigation officer, Krianael, and our medical officer, Dr. Zilfan. Welcome aboard the Zephyr and Dawn, Commander Chun." The human's face transformed with what Vexhai assumed was a positive expression, showing white dental structures in what appeared to be a threat display, though her body language suggested the opposite. "Thank you all. I cannot express how grateful I am for your rescue. Without your help, I would have died out here." Dr. Zilfin stepped forward, her 6 arms weaving in the traditional Nexarian greeting pattern. "Commander, I must insist on a medical examination. 6 months in such conditions must have taken a severe toll on your physiology." "Of course, doctor. But honestly, I feel better than I should. Humans are apparently more resilient than we thought." As they made their way to the medical bay, Commander Chun explained her situation. Humanity had only recently developed the technology for interstellar travel, achieving faster-than-light capability through what she described as an Alcubierre drive prototype. Her mission was to reach the nearest star system and establish first contact with any intelligent species they might encounter. "Your species developed FTL travel before joining the Galactic Commerce Alliance?" Krianael asked, her translator working to convey her surprise. "We didn't know there was a Galactic Commerce Alliance," Chun replied. "As far as we knew, humanity was alone in the universe. This mission was our first attempt to find out if that was true." Vexhai felt a chill run through his gill slits. A species developing interstellar travel in isolation was almost unheard of. Most races were contacted and guided by the Alliance long before they achieved such technological milestones. The fact that humanity had reached this level of development without any outside assistance suggested an intelligence and determination that was remarkable. In the medical bay, Dr. Zilfin conducted her examination with characteristic thoroughness. Her advanced scanners revealed the human physiology in detail, and what they found was extraordinary. "Captain," the doctor said privately, "this being should not be alive. Her species appears to have evolved on a high-gravity world with a remarkably dense atmosphere. Their bone structure is incredibly dense, their muscle fibers are designed for extreme stress tolerance, and their cardiovascular system is redundant in ways I have never seen." "What do you mean, redundant?" "They have a backup circulatory system, Captain. If their primary heart fails, secondary pumping mechanisms can maintain blood flow. Their brain chemistry is adapted to function under extreme stress for extended periods. Their digestive system can extract nutrients from almost any organic matter. They are quite literally built for survival in conditions that would kill most galactic species." Vexhai processed this information carefully. "Doctor, in your professional opinion, how did Commander Chun survive 6 months in that primitive vessel?" "She survived because her species is designed to survive, Captain. Humans appear to be one of the most resilient forms of life I have ever encountered. The fact that she maintained her sanity during such an ordeal suggests a psychological fortitude that matches her physical capabilities." When Dr. Zilfin declared Commander Chun healthy despite her ordeal, they gathered in the ship's common area. Chun had accepted their offer of clean clothing, and now wore a standard Alliance jumpsuit that had been adjusted for her unusual bipedal physiology. "Commander," Vexhai began, "we must discuss your situation. Your vessel is beyond repair, and Earth is not within our normal trade routes. However, we cannot simply abandon you in unknown space." Chun nodded gravely. "I understand, Captain. I'm grateful for whatever help you can provide. If you could take me to the nearest inhabited world, I could try to arrange transport back to Earth somehow. The nearest Alliance world is Nexus Prime, about 3 days' travel from here. It's a major trading hub where ships from across the galaxy converge. You should be able to find passage there, though I'm not certain how you would pay for it. Interstellar travel is expensive, even for established species. I have some items that might be of value," Chun said, producing a small device from her suit. "This is one of our quantum computers. It's primitive by your standards, I'm sure, but it might have some trade value." Krianael examined the device with interest. "Commander, this is not primitive at all. The quantum processing architecture is completely different from Alliance standard designs. Our computer specialists would pay handsomely to study this technology. Vexhai made a decision that would prove more significant than he could have imagined. Commander Chun, you owe us nothing for this rescue. It is the duty of all spacefaring beings to assist those in distress. However, if you would be willing to share information about human technology and culture, we would consider that payment enough for passage to Nexus Prime. The human's facial expression transformed again into that threatening display of dental structures, but her body language remained peaceful. Captain, I would be honored to share everything I know about humanity with you and your crew. It's the least I can do. Over the next 3 days, as the Zephyrian Dawn traveled toward Nexus Prime, Commander Chun proved to be a fascinating guest. She shared details about human history, technology, and culture that amazed the crew. Her species had apparently developed from aggressive predators on a dangerous world, explaining their remarkable physical capabilities and psychological resilience. But what impressed Vexhai most was not Chin's survival abilities or her species' technological achievements. It was her absolute insistence on repaying what she saw as a debt of gratitude. Despite repeated assurances that no payment was necessary, she continued to offer whatever help or knowledge she could provide. Captain, she said on their final evening together, you saved my life when you had no obligation to do so. Where I come from, that creates a debt that cannot be ignored. If you or your crew ever need anything that humanity can provide, you need only ask. Vexhai had heard such promises before from grateful beings he had rescued, but something in Commander Chin's voice convinced him that humans took such obligations more seriously than most species. There was a weight to her words, a solemnity that suggested this was not merely polite gratitude, but a genuine commitment. Commander, we require nothing more than the friendship you have already offered. Your species sounds like one we would be honored to know better. And you will, Captain. Once I return to Earth and report on this encounter, humanity will be very interested in establishing formal contact with the Galactic Commerce Alliance. We are eager to join the galactic community. As they approached Nexus Prime, Vexhai couldn't shake the feeling that this encounter would prove more significant than a simple rescue mission. Commander Chun represented something new in his experience, a species that had achieved interstellar travel through sheer determination and ingenuity without guidance or assistance from established galactic powers. The docking procedures at Nexus Prime were routine, but Commander Chin's presence drew immediate attention from Alliance officials. A human was an unknown species, and first contact protocols had to be followed. Vexhai found himself serving as an unofficial ambassador, explaining the circumstances of their meeting to Alliance bureaucrats who seemed fascinated by this new discovery. Captain, Chun said as they parted ways at the station's immigration center, I meant what I said about repaying this debt. Humanity does not forget its friends. Vexhai watched her disappear into the crowds of Nexus Prime, just another being among millions seeking passage to distant worlds. At the time, he thought he might never see Commander Sarachin again. He had no way of knowing that her words would prove prophetic, or that the debt she felt she owed would reshape the balance of power in their galaxy. The Zephyrian Dawn departed Nexus Prime the next day, resuming their regular trade route with a cargo hold full of Nexarian art crystals bound for the Vorthak homeworld. Life aboard the ship returned to normal, but Vexhai found himself thinking often about the remarkable human he had rescued. 3 months later, those thoughts would prove to be more than mere curiosity. The galaxy was about to learn what it meant when humans owed you a debt, and the lesson would be both powerful and unforgettable. The automated distress beacon cut through the quantum communications array like a blade through silk, jerking Captain Vexhai from his meditation cycle. Emergency protocols engaged immediately aboard the Zephyrian Dawn, bathing the bridge in the crimson glow of alert status. 3 months had passed since their encounter with Commander Chun, and life had settled back into the comfortable routine of interstellar commerce. Captain to the bridge immediately. Crianel's voice echoed through the ship's communication system, carrying an urgency that made Vexhai's gill slits flutter with concern. He arrived on the bridge to find his crew clustered around the communications console, their various appendages working frantically across holographic displays. The distress signal continued its mechanical repetition, broadcasting coordinates and a brief message that chilled him to his core. Report, he ordered, settling into his command chair. Krianael's four arms continued their dance across the controls as she spoke. The signal is coming from the Kepler 442 mining colony, Captain. The same world where we collected our last cargo of crystalline formations. They're reporting an attack by unknown raiders. Thuntor's massive frame appeared on the bridge viewer from engineering. Captain, those raiders aren't unknown. Intelligence reports have been flooding the Alliance networks for weeks. They call themselves the Hegemony of Purity, and they've been systematically attacking Outer Rim colonies. Vexai had heard whispers of this new threat during their stops at various trading posts. The Hegemony was apparently a militant coalition of several species who believed that space belonged only to those who had achieved technological superiority through what they called natural evolution. They viewed trade with primitive species as contamination of the galaxy's rightful order. "How far are we from Kepler 442? He asked. 18 hours at maximum thrust, Krianael replied. "But, Captain, we're a merchant vessel. We have no weapons beyond basic defensive shields. If the Hegemony is still there, we can't ignore a distress call," Vexai said firmly. "It's against everything we stand for as spacefaring beings. Set course for Kepler 442, maximum thrust." The journey passed in tense silence. Long-range sensors showed no other Alliance vessels in the vicinity, which meant the mining colony was on its own against whatever force had attacked them. As they approached the system, the scope of the disaster became clear. The orbital mining platforms that had been bustling with activity just months ago were now twisted reeking, their hulls torn open and venting atmosphere into space. Several cargo vessels floated dead in orbit, their drives cold, and their hulls blackened by energy weapons. The planetary surface showed the glow of fires in multiple locations. By the ancient makers, Dr. Zilfin whispered from her station. How many beings were living on that colony? Approximately 50,000, representing 12 different species, Krianael answered, her voice tight with emotion. All of them civilians, mostly miners, and their families. As they entered orbit, their sensors detected 3 large vessels departing from the far side of the planet. The ships were clearly military in design, bristling with weapon emplacements, and moving with the coordinated precision of a trained fleet. Even at maximum sensor range, Vexai could see they outgunned his merchant ship by orders of magnitude. "They're moving away from us, Captain," Thuntor reported. "Probably heading to their next target. Should we pursue?" "Negative. Our priority is search and rescue. Begin scanning for survivors." The next several hours were among the most difficult in Vexai's long career. They found scattered survivor groups, hiding in mine shafts and reinforced buildings, but the numbers were devastating. Of the 50,000 beings who had called Kepler 442 home, fewer than 8,000 had survived the attack. The stories the survivors told were consistent and horrifying. The Hegemony ships had arrived without warning, demanding the immediate evacuation of all primitive species from the colony. When the colonial administrator, a reasonable Vorthack named Sulthani, had tried to negotiate, they had opened fire on the civilian population. They said the galaxy belonged to the evolved races. One survivor, a young Gorvanian miner, told them. "They called us genetic waste, contaminating space with our presence. They killed anyone who tried to resist." Dr. Zilfin worked tirelessly to treat the wounded, but many injuries were beyond even her advanced medical capabilities. The Hegemony had used some kind of energy weapon that caused cellular breakdown at the molecular level, creating wounds that refused to heal properly. As they loaded the last of the survivors aboard their ship, Vexai faced a terrible decision. The Zephyrian Dawn was designed to carry a crew of 12 and perhaps a few passengers. They now had over 300 survivors crowded into every available space, with life support systems strained beyond their design limits. "Captain," Krianael said quietly, "we need to reach an Alliance world quickly. Our air recycling systems can't handle this load for more than a few days." The nearest Alliance world was Nexus Prime, the same station where they had left Commander Chun 3 months ago. It would take 4 days to reach it at their current speed, pushing their life support systems past their breaking point. They would need to make emergency stops to replenish their air supply, but no Alliance facilities existed between their current position and Nexus Prime. "Set course for Nexus Prime," Vexai ordered. "Emergency speed, and send a priority message to Alliance Command. They need to know the Hegemony is targeting civilian populations." The journey became a nightmare of overcrowding and failing systems. The survivors, traumatized by their ordeal, struggled with the close quarters and uncertainty about their future. Several beings died from their injuries despite Dr. Zilfin's best efforts, their bodies simply unable to cope with the molecular damage inflicted by hegemony weapons. On the second day, their main air recycling unit failed completely. Backup systems engaged, but they were designed for emergency use only and couldn't sustain the ship's current population. Carbon dioxide levels began rising throughout the ship, and being started showing signs of respiratory distress. Captain Thunktor's voice was grim. We need to reduce our population load, or everyone aboard is going to die. The recycling systems just can't handle this many life forms. Vexai stared at the environmental readings, knowing that his chief engineer was right. They could save perhaps half the survivors, but the rest would have to be left behind in escape pods, hoping that another ship would find them before their limited air supplies ran out. It was an impossible choice, but one that seemed inevitable. That's when the quantum communications array activated with an incoming message. Merchant vessel Zephyrian Dawn. This is Admiral Sarah Chun aboard the Earth ship Determination. We received your distress signal and are moving to intercept. Please respond. Vexai felt his gill slits flutter with disbelief. Commander Chun? But how did you? It's Admiral Chun now, Captain Vexai. The human's voice came through clearly. I've been promoted since our last meeting. When we heard about the attack on Kepler 442, we knew we had to help. We owe you a debt, remember? Admiral, we appreciate the offer, but we're in a critical situation. Our life support systems are failing, and we have over 300 survivors aboard. Unless you have a ship capable of taking on passengers. Captain, we're not just one ship. Look at your long-range sensors. Krianael's hands flew over her console, extending their sensor range to maximum. What she found defied belief. A fleet of 12 vessels was approaching their position at incredible speed, their engine signatures unlike anything in Alliance databases. Admiral, those ships, what are they? The First Earth Defense Fleet, Captain. After I returned home and reported on my rescue, humanity decided it was time to join the galactic community properly. We've been building ships based on the technological exchanges we've had with Alliance members over the past 3 months. The human fleet arrived within hours, their ships sleek and powerful in ways that surprised Vexai. They were clearly based on Alliance designs, but incorporated innovations that he had never seen before. The lead vessel, Determination, was nearly twice the size of any merchant ship in the Alliance fleet. Admiral Chun, Vexai said as the human ships took position around his vessel. How did you build such a fleet so quickly? This level of construction should take years. Chen's laughter came through the communications system, warm and confident. Captain, you've never seen humans work when we have a goal in mind. When the Alliance Council told us about the hegemony threat, every shipyard on Earth switched to military production. We've been working around the clock for 3 months. The transfer of survivors to the human ships was executed with military precision. Each of the Earth vessels had been equipped with expanded life support systems specifically designed to handle large numbers of refugees. Medical teams wearing advanced environmental suits moved efficiently through the crowded spaces of the Zephyrian Dawn, treating the wounded and preparing them for transport. Your medical technology, Dr. Zilfin observed to one of the human medics, it's remarkably advanced. This healing accelerator device, where did you develop it? We adapted it from Nexarian medical scanners, the human medic replied. But we incorporated some quantum resonance techniques that amplify the healing effect. Humans are good at taking existing technology and finding new applications for it. As the last survivor was transferred to safety, Admiral Chun requested permission to come aboard the Zephyrian Dawn. Vexai granted it immediately, curious to see how the human had changed since their last meeting. The being who stepped through the airlock was transformed. Commander Chun had been impressive in her determination and resilience, but Admiral Chun radiated authority and confidence that spoke of rapid advancement through human military ranks. She wore a uniform that was both practical and elegant, and her movement suggested extensive military training. Captain Vexai, she said, extending her hand in the human gesture of greeting. It's good to see you again. Admiral Chun, I'm amazed by what humanity has accomplished. This fleet, your technology, the speed of your response, it's remarkable. Chen's expression grew serious. Captain, when you saved my life, you didn't just rescue one human. You gave humanity hope that we weren't alone in the universe, that there were other species out there who shared our values of helping those in need. That hope drove everything we've done since. But how did you know we were in trouble? We've been monitoring Alliance communications since joining the Commerce Agreement last month. When we heard about the hegemony attacks, humanity decided we couldn't stand by and watch innocent beings die. We've been deploying our fleets to protect Outer Rim colonies. Krianel joined the conversation, her four arms weaving in respectful greeting patterns. Admiral, forgive my curiosity, but your species achieved this level of military capability in just 3 months? Humans are at our best when we have something to fight for, Chen replied. The knowledge that beings like Captain Vexhai exist, beings who risk their own safety to help strangers, gave us something worth protecting. We won't let the hegemony destroy that. As they traveled together toward Nexus Prime, Chen shared more details about humanity's rapid integration into the galactic community. Earth had formally joined the Galactic Commerce Alliance, but on their own terms. Instead of simply adopting existing technologies and practices, humans had brought innovation and fresh perspectives that were already reshaping Alliance standards. Your quantum computers, Thumtor noted during a meal in the ship's common area, they process data in ways our systems never could. Our entire navigation network is being upgraded with human-designed improvements. And your medical advances, Dr. Zilfan added, combining multiple species techniques into new healing methods we never thought possible. Chun smiled. That display of dental structures that Vexhai had learned indicated human pleasure rather than aggression. We're good at synthesis, at taking the best ideas from different sources and combining them into something new. It's probably because we developed in isolation for so long. We had to figure everything out for ourselves. The conversation was interrupted by an urgent transmission from the human fleet scout ships. Long-range sensors had detected a massive hegemony force moving toward the Centauri colonies, one of the most populous Alliance territories. The attack force consisted of over 40 military vessels, more than enough to overwhelm any conventional defense. Admiral, the scout ship commander reported, the hegemony fleet will reach Centauri in 18 hours. Alliance defense forces in the sector are minimal, mostly patrol ships and customs vessels. Chen's expression hardened, and Vexhai saw something in her eyes that reminded him of the determined survivor he had rescued months ago. How many beings live in the Centauri colonies? Approximately 2 million, representing 23 different species. It's one of the oldest and most established Alliance territories. Then, we're going to stop them, Chen said simply. Captain Vexhai, would you be willing to continue to Nexus Prime with the survivors? We need to intercept that hegemony fleet before they reach Centauri. Vexhai felt a chill run through his gill slits. Admiral, with respect, 12 ships against 40? Those odds are better than the odds I faced drifting in space for 6 months, Chen interrupted. Captain, you taught me something important when you rescued me. You showed me that the universe has beings in it worth protecting. Now it's humanity's turn to do the protecting. As the human fleet changed course toward the Centauri colonies, Vexhai watched them disappear in a hyperspace with a mixture of admiration and worry. Admiral Chun had spoken of repaying a debt, but this seemed like far more than gratitude. This was humanity announcing its presence in the galaxy in the most dramatic way possible. He had saved one human's life 3 months ago. Now the human was leading her entire species into battle against impossible odds, all because she believed the universe contained beings worth dying for. As the Zephyrian Dawn continued toward Nexus Prime with its cargo of survivors, Vexhai began to understand what it truly meant when humans owed you a debt. The repayment, he realized, might just change the galaxy forever. The holographic displays in the Alliance Defense Command Center on Nexus Prime painted a grim picture of the developing battle near Centauri. Admiral Korithval of the Nexarian Defense Force stood before the tactical display, his 6 arms weaving complex patterns of calculation as he processed the incoming data streams. Captain Vexhai stood beside him, granted temporary observer status after delivering the Kepler 442 survivors to safety. The human fleet has engaged the hegemony force, reported Lieutenant Velnara. Her Vorthack features tense with concentration. Initial contact occurred at the edge of the Centauri system, approximately 6 hours ahead of our best-case projections. The tactical display showed two groups of ships converging in the empty space between star systems. 43 hegemony vessels, their formations precise and overwhelming, faced 12 human ships arranged in what appeared to be a defensive screen. To any experienced military observer, the outcome seemed predetermined. "Have we received any communications from Admiral Chun?" Korthval asked. "Negative, sir. The humans are maintaining communication silence, but their tactical data is being broadcast on Alliance emergency frequencies." Vexhai watched the display with growing anxiety. The ships representing Admiral Chen's fleet seemed impossibly small compared to the massive hegemony dreadnoughts bearing down on them. Each hegemony vessel was a testament to militant engineering, bristling with weapon systems and armor to withstand prolonged combat. "Admiral Korthval," he said, "what are the standard protocols for this type of engagement?" The Nexarian's compound eyes focused on the display. Against such overwhelming odds, standard Alliance doctrine would be to withdraw and establish a defensive perimeter around the target colonies. Attempting to engage a force 4 times your size in open space is considered tactical suicide. Then, why are the humans advancing? Before Korthval could answer, the tactical display exploded into motion. The human ships had suddenly accelerated, not away from the hegemony fleet, but directly toward it, their formation shifting from defensive to something the computer systems struggled to identify. "Lieutenant, what is that formation pattern?" Korthval demanded. Velnara's fingers worked frantically across her console. "I don't recognize it, Admiral. The computer can't match it to any known Alliance or hegemony tactical doctrine. It appears to be improvisational." The first exchange of fire lit up the tactical display like a festival celebration. Hegemony energy weapons, designed to overwhelm shields through concentrated firepower, lanced out toward the human ships. But instead of taking the hits on their forward shields as doctrine suggested, the human vessels scattered in what looked like complete chaos. "They're breaking formation," Lieutenant Velnara reported, confusion evident in her voice. "The human fleet has separated into individual units with no apparent coordination." Vexhai watched in fascination as 12 human ships danced through the incoming fire like leaves in a storm. Their movements seemed random, unpredictable, yet somehow each vessel managed to avoid the concentrated bombardments that should have destroyed them instantly. "Admiral," the communications officer called out, "we're receiving a transmission from the human fleet." Admiral Chen's voice filled the command center, calm and steady despite the chaos of battle surrounding her. "Alliance Command, this is Admiral Chun aboard Determination. We are engaging the hegemony force using non-standard tactics. Recommend you observe and analyze for future reference." "Admiral Chun," Korthval responded, "your current engagement pattern appears highly irregular. Our tactical computers cannot predict your fleet's movements." Chen's laughter came through the speakers, warm with what sounded almost like amusement. "Admiral, that's exactly the point. Humans learned early in our history that predictable tactics get you killed. We're about to introduce the hegemony to some concepts they haven't encountered before." On the tactical display, the seemingly chaotic human formations suddenly resolved into a pattern that made Vexhai's gill slits flutter with amazement. The 12 ships had formed a 3-dimensional web around the hegemony fleet, each vessel positioned to support its neighbors while maintaining maximum mobility. "They're using pack hunting tactics," he breathed, "like predators surrounding prey." The nature of the engagement changed dramatically as the human ships began coordinated attacks on isolated hegemony vessels. Instead of standing and trading fire in the traditional manner, they struck quickly and withdrew, forcing their enemies to constantly reposition and preventing the larger fleet from bringing its full firepower to bear. "The lead hegemony dreadnought has taken significant damage," Lieutenant Velnara reported. 3 human ships executed a synchronized attack run that overwhelmed its rear shields. "The vessel is listing and has lost primary power." Korthval's 6 arms moved in patterns that indicated deep thought. "How are they coordinating these attacks?" "We're not detecting any tactical communications between their ships." "Sir," the communications officer said, "the human vessels appear to be using quantum-encrypted burst transmissions that last for microseconds. Our systems can barely detect them, let alone decode them." As the battle continued, it became clear that the humans had not simply built ships based on Alliance designs. They had fundamentally reimagined space combat tactics. Their vessels moved in ways that suggested they had studied the fighting patterns of Earth's predatory species and adapted them for three-dimensional space warfare. The hegemony fleet is attempting to regroup, Velnara reported. They're forming a defensive sphere to protect their damaged vessels. On the display, the hegemony ships moved into a tight formation that should have been impregnable. Overlapping shields and coordinated fire patterns created a defensive matrix that no reasonable force would attempt to penetrate. Admiral Chun, Korithval, transmitted, "The enemy has established a defensive formation. Recommend you withdraw and await Alliance reinforcements." Negative, Alliance command. "We're going to try something they won't expect." What happened next violated every principle of space combat that Alliance military academies taught. The human ships suddenly accelerated directly toward the hegemony defensive sphere, their formation shifting into a tight spearhead that aimed for the strongest point of the enemy defenses. "They're committing suicide," Korithval whispered. "No formation can penetrate a defensive sphere from the front." But the human ships didn't attempt to penetrate the sphere. At the last possible moment, they scattered again, each vessel following a different vector that took them around, over, and under the hegemony formation. The defensive matrix, designed to repel frontal assaults, found itself attacked from 12 different directions simultaneously. "Impossible," Lieutenant Velnara said. "The coordination required for that maneuver. Our best pilots couldn't execute something like that without months of practice." Admiral Chen's voice came through the communications again. "Alliance Command, humans have been practicing three-dimensional movement since before we left our home planet. We call it flying, and we've been doing it for over a century." The hegemony defensive sphere collapsed as human ships struck weak points in their formation with surgical precision. Ships that had seemed invincible moments before found their shields failing under attacks that came from vectors their designers had never anticipated. "Admiral," Velnara's voice carried a note of disbelief, "the hegemony fleet is withdrawing. Repeat, the enemy force is retreating from the system." The tactical display showed the remaining hegemony vessels, nearly half their original number either destroyed or severely damaged, falling back toward the edge of the system. The human ships pursued them briefly, then formed a protective screen between the retreating enemy and the Centauri colonies. "Alliance Command, this is Admiral Chun. The hegemony threat to Centauri has been neutralized. We're beginning search and rescue operations for enemy survivors." Korithval stared at the display for several long moments before responding. "Admiral Chun, that was unprecedented. How did your fleet achieve such tactical superiority?" "Admiral, when Captain Vexhai rescued me from certain death, he taught me something important about the galactic community. There are beings out there worth protecting, worth fighting for. Humans have always been at our best when we're protecting others." Vexhai felt a complex mixture of pride and awe as he listened to Chen's words. The human he had rescued from a drifting wreck had returned with an entire fleet and tactical innovations that had just revolutionized space combat. But more than that, she had done it because of a sense of obligation and gratitude that ran deeper than he had ever imagined. "Admiral Chun," he said, activating his own communication channel, "this is Captain Vexhai, aboard Nexus Prime. What you've accomplished here goes far beyond repaying any debt." "Captain," Chen's voice warmed noticeably, "you're wrong about that. When you saved my life, you didn't just rescue one human. You showed our entire species that the universe contains beings who risk themselves for strangers, who value life above profit or convenience. That knowledge changed us." Over the next several hours, as the human fleet assisted with rescue operations and began the long process of securing the battlefield, more details emerged about humanity's rapid rise to military prominence. The 12 ships that had just defeated a vastly superior force were only the beginning. Earth had launched similar fleets toward every threatened Alliance territory, each one equipped with innovations that combined human ingenuity with Alliance technology. "Admiral," Lieutenant Velnara reported, "we're receiving reports from across the Alliance. Human fleets have engaged hegemony forces at 7 different locations. In every case, the enemy has been defeated or forced to withdraw." Korithval's compound eyes studied the incoming reports with growing amazement. "How is this possible? 3 months ago, humanity was unknown to us. Now, they're single-handedly turning the tide of the war." The answer came from an unexpected source. Dr. Zilfen, who had remained on Nexus Prime to treat the survivors from Kepler, 442, joined them in the command center with a datapad full of medical analysis. "Admirals," she said, "I've been studying human physiology since our encounter with Commander Chun. What we're seeing isn't just tactical innovation. It's the result of evolutionary advantages that make humans uniquely suited for combat operations." She activated a holographic display showing human anatomical structures. Their reaction times are significantly faster than most Alliance species. Their ability to process multiple sensory inputs simultaneously is remarkable, and their psychological makeup allows them to maintain tactical thinking under extreme stress levels that would incapacitate most beings. "You're saying humans are naturally superior warriors?" Korthval asked. "I'm saying humans evolved to survive in conditions that would kill most galactic species. They're not superior, they're specialized. And when that specialization is combined with advanced technology and a motivation to protect others." She gestured toward the tactical display, showing the aftermath of the battle. "You get results like this." Admiral Chin's voice interrupted their discussion. "Alliance Command, we're transmitting detailed tactical analysis of this engagement to your military databases. We want every Alliance species to have access to these innovations." "Admiral," Korthval responded, "such tactical information is usually classified. Why are you sharing it freely?" "Because Captain Vexhai showed us that the Alliance is more than just a trade agreement. It's a community of species that look out for each other. Humans want to contribute to that community, not dominate it." As the Zephyrian Dawn prepared to depart Nexus Prime for their next trade run, Vexhai found himself reflecting on the extraordinary chain of events that had begun with a simple rescue operation. He had saved one human life, and the human had returned with a fleet that was reshaping the balance of power in the galaxy. But perhaps more importantly, humanity's response to their debt had demonstrated something profound about the nature of gratitude and obligation. Most species, when rescued, felt a brief sense of gratitude that faded with time. Humans, apparently, viewed such debts as permanent responsibilities that extended far beyond the original recipients of their aid. "Captain," Krinael said as they prepared to depart, "do you think we'll see Admiral Chin again?" Vexhai considered the question carefully. "I don't know if we'll see the Admiral again, but I suspect we'll be seeing the results of human gratitude for a very long time to come." He was more right than he could have possibly imagined. The defeat of the hegemony forces at Centauri was only the beginning of humanity's impact on the galactic community. As word spread of their tactical innovations and their commitment to protecting Alliance members, more and more species began to reconsider their assumptions about warfare, cooperation, and the true meaning of civilization. The debt that Admiral Chun felt she owed to Captain Vexhai was being repaid not just to him, but to every member of the Galactic Commerce Alliance. And as subsequent events would prove, when humans committed to protecting something, they did so with a thoroughness and determination that would fundamentally alter the course of galactic history. The hegemony had made a critical error in their assessment of the Alliance's military capabilities. They had assumed that a coalition of peaceful traders could not mount an effective defense against organized aggression. They had failed to account for the fact that humans, when motivated by gratitude and a sense of obligation, could accomplish things that seemed impossible to more conventional minds. As the Zephyrian Dawn entered hyperspace for their next destination, Vexhai smiled to himself. He had spent decades rescuing stranded beings throughout the galaxy, always considering it simply the right thing to do. Never before had such an action resulted in the emergence of an entirely new form of military doctrine and a species determined to protect everyone who shared their values. When humans owed you a debt, the repayment was indeed powerful and unforgettable. But as the galaxy was about to learn, it was also far from finished. 6 months after the Battle of Centauri, the galaxy had become a very different place. Captain Vexhai stood in the observation deck of the newly constructed Alliance defense station orbiting Kepler 442, watching human construction crews work alongside engineers from 17 different species to rebuild what the hegemony had destroyed. The mining colony that had been devastated was now becoming a fortress world, protected by defensive systems that incorporated technologies from across the Alliance. But it wasn't just the military innovations that had transformed the galactic community. Human diplomatic, scientific, and cultural exchanges had created connections between species that had never existed before. Trade routes that had remained static for millennia were being revolutionized by human logistics innovations. Scientific discoveries were accelerating as human research methods combined with alien expertise in ways no one had anticipated. Captain Vexhai, a familiar voice called from behind him. He turned to see Admiral Chun approaching, her uniform now bearing insignia that marked her as Supreme Commander of Allied Defense Forces, a position that hadn't existed before humanity joined the Alliance. Admiral Chun, he replied, offering the traditional Altarian greeting gesture. I didn't expect to see you here personally. I make it a point to visit every world that was attacked by the hegemony, she said, moving to stand beside him at the observation windows. It helps me remember why we're doing all this. Below them, the planet's surface showed signs of remarkable recovery. What had been burning ruins 6 months ago were now thriving communities, their architecture reflecting a fusion of multiple species' design philosophies. Human efficiency had accelerated the reconstruction process, but alien expertise had made it beautiful and functional in ways that purely human settlements never achieved. How many worlds have you visited like this? Vexai asked. 47 so far. Everyone tells the same story of resilience and cooperation. The hegemony thought they could break the Alliance by attacking our weakest points, but they ended up proving how strong we are when we work together. Chin's expression grew thoughtful as she watched a mixed crew of humans and Gorvanians installing a new communications array. Captain, I need to talk to you about something. The Alliance Council has made a decision about the hegemony war, and it's going to change everything. Vexhai felt his gill slits flutter with concern. What kind of change? We're not just going to defend against hegemony attacks anymore. We're going to end this war permanently by targeting their home systems directly. The implications hit Vexhai immediately. That's a massive escalation, Admiral. Are you certain it's necessary? Chun turned from the window, her expression serious. Captain, in the 6 months since Centauri, the hegemony has adapted their tactics. They've stopped attacking defended positions and started targeting undefended civilian populations. Last week they hit a hospital ship carrying wounded refugees from 3 species. They killed 6,000 beings who posed no military threat whatsoever. Even so, attacking their home systems is exactly what they've been doing to us, Chin interrupted. The difference is that we're going to do it surgically, targeting only their military infrastructure. No civilian casualties, no destruction of non-military targets. We're going to prove that there's a better way to fight a war. Over the next hour, Chin outlined the scope of humanity's plan for ending the hegemony threat. It was ambitious beyond anything the Alliance had ever attempted, involving coordinated strikes on 47 separate star systems simultaneously. The goal was not conquest or destruction, but the complete elimination of the hegemony's ability to wage aggressive war. The technology we've developed for this operation, Chin explained, is based on principles that human scientists discovered while studying Alliance databases. We found ways to disable military systems without harming the beings who operate them. Weapons that shut down rather than destroy. Shields that contain rather than deflect. You're talking about revolutionary advances in military science, Vexhai observed. How did humanity achieve such breakthroughs so quickly? Chen's smile carried a mixture of pride and determination. Captain, you saved my life when you had no obligation to do so. That act of kindness introduced humanity to a galaxy full of beings who share our values of protecting the innocent and helping those in need. When humans are inspired, we can accomplish remarkable things. She activated a portable holographic display showing the planned operation in detail. We call it Operation Gratitude, and it's humanity's way of ensuring that what you did for me extends to every being in the Alliance. No one should have to face the choice between abandoning innocent civilians or watching them die. The scale of human preparation was staggering. In addition to the military fleets that would carry out the strikes, humanity had mobilized massive humanitarian resources to assist hegemony civilians who might be affected by the collapse of their militant government. Medical ships, emergency supplies, and temporary housing were being positioned throughout hegemony space. You're planning to help the beings whose government has been trying to exterminate you, Vexhai said with amazement. Captain, one of the first things we learned from the Alliance was that the actions of a government don't reflect the nature of all its people. The hegemony leadership may be murderous fanatics, but most of their population are just ordinary beings trying to live their lives. When their military collapses, those civilians are going to need help. As they talked, Vexhai began to understand the true scope of human gratitude. This wasn't just about repaying a debt to him personally. Humanity had taken a lesson of his rescue and applied it on a galactic scale. They were determined to create a universe where no being would face the hopeless situation that Commander Chun had experienced drifting alone in space. Admiral, may I ask you something personal? Of course, Captain. When I rescued you from that drifting ship, you were one being facing certain death. Now you're commanding fleets and planning operations that will reshape the galaxy. How do you handle such responsibility? Chun was quiet for a long moment, watching the construction activities below. Captain, every morning I wake up and remember that I'm alive because a stranger decided that saving one unknown being was worth risking his ship and crew. That memory reminds me that every life has value, that every act of kindness can have consequences far beyond what we imagine. She turned to face him directly. You didn't save Commander Seraph Chun that day. You saved everyone who will benefit from humanity's presence in the Alliance, everyone who will be protected by our fleets, everyone who will live because we chose to fight the hegemony instead of hiding behind our defenses. The conversation was interrupted by an urgent communication from the planet's surface. Dr. Zilfen, who had been working with the reconstruction effort, requested immediate transportation to the station. Her message indicated a discovery of significant importance to their discussion of hegemony civilians. When the elderly Nexarian arrived at the station, she carried with her a collection of data crystals and holographic records that painted a disturbing picture of life within hegemony space. Admiral, Captain, she said, her 6 arms weaving patterns of distress. What we've discovered about hegemony society changes everything we thought we knew about this conflict. The holographic displays showed internal hegemony communications intercepted during recent battles. Rather than a unified militant society, the recordings revealed a population living under brutal oppression. Dissent was punished by genetic modification that reduced intelligence and independence. Military service was enforced through family hostage systems. Entire species within hegemony space lived as slaves, their labor supporting the war effort. The beings fighting us, Dr. Zilfen explained, aren't willing participants in this war. They're victims of a system that controls them through terror and biological manipulation. When we disable their military infrastructure, we'll be liberating them, not conquering them. Admiral Chen studied the data with growing determination. This confirms our humanitarian planning was correct. Doctor, how many beings are we talking about? Approximately 800 million across 47 systems. All of them will need immediate medical attention to reverse the genetic modifications, psychological support to recover from years of oppression, and assistance in rebuilding their societies. Vexhai felt overwhelmed by the scope of what humanity was proposing. Admiral, the resources required for such an operation are already being mobilized, Chen replied. Captain, humanity has spent the last 6 months not just building weapons and ships, but preparing to take responsibility for the consequences of our actions. We've constructed hospital ships, trained diplomatic corps in 43 different languages, and developed technologies specifically for reversing genetic manipulation. The holographic display shifted to show the logistical network humanity had created. Supply ships, medical facilities, and temporary habitation modules were positioned throughout space, ready to support the largest humanitarian operation in galactic history. The planning was so comprehensive that it included contingencies for species-specific dietary requirements and cultural practices. How is this possible? Vexhai asked. The coordination alone. Humans are good at logistics, Captain. We had to be to survive on a planet that was actively trying to kill us. But more than that, we're motivated by the knowledge that this is the right thing to do. Chen activated another display showing human manufacturing centers. Every shipyard on Earth has been converted to produce humanitarian supplies. Every university is training specialists in alien psychology and medicine. Every city has volunteer groups preparing aid packages. This isn't just a military operation, Captain. It's humanity's entire civilization mobilizing to help beings we've never met. As they reviewed the plans for Operation Gratitude, Vexhai began to understand something profound about human psychology. Most species, when threatened, focus their efforts on defense and retaliation. Humans, when threatened, apparently focused on eliminating the source of threat while simultaneously helping its victims. "Admiral," he said, "this operation could fail. If the hegemony discovers your plans, if their defenses prove more effective than anticipated, you could lose entire fleets." "Captain, 6 months ago, I was drifting in space with no hope of survival. Today I'm commanding fleets and planning the liberation of 800 million beings. If you hadn't taken the risk to save me, none of this would be possible." Chen's expression grew resolute. Humanity learned something important from that rescue. We learned that the universe is worth fighting for, that there are beings in it who will risk everything to help strangers. Now, it's our turn to take those risks. The final details of Operation Gratitude were staggering in their scope and ambition. Human fleets would simultaneously strike 47 hegemony military installations, using non-lethal weapons to disable their capability for aggressive action. Immediately afterward, humanitarian fleets would move in to provide medical care, food, shelter, and assistance in establishing new governments based on consent rather than coercion. The most remarkable aspect, Dr. Zilfen observed, is that humanity has developed technologies specifically to help beings they've never encountered. Medical systems that can adapt to unknown physiologies, communication devices that can learn new languages in real time, even psychological therapy techniques for treating trauma they've never seen. "Doctor, when you're preparing to save 800 million beings, you have to plan for every possibility," Chen replied. "We can't afford to discover that we're not prepared for some form of suffering we didn't anticipate." As the meeting concluded, Vexai found himself struggling to process the magnitude of what humanity was attempting. In less than a year, they had gone from unknown primitives to the architects of the largest humanitarian operation in galactic history. All because one human had decided that a debt of gratitude extended to every being in the universe. "Admiral Chun," he said as they prepared to part ways, "I need you to know something. When I rescued you from that drifting ship, I was simply following the principles that govern civilized spacefaring beings. I never expected anything in return. I know that, Captain. That's exactly why humanity feels obligated to do this. You risked your life for a stranger because it was the right thing to do. We're risking our entire civilization because it's the right thing to do." Chen's smile carried the same determination he had seen in the young commander he had rescued. "Captain, you taught us that the universe contains beings worth saving. Now we're going to prove that lesson by saving everyone we can." As Vexai watched Admiral Chen depart for her next inspection tour, he realized that his simple act of rescue had set in motion events that would reshape the galaxy in ways he could never have imagined. Operation Gratitude would either liberate 800 million beings and end the hegemony threat forever, or it would result in the destruction of humanity's entire military capability. But, as he had learned over the past months, when humans committed to something, they did so with a thoroughness and determination that defied conventional expectations. The debt that Admiral Chun felt she owed him had become humanity's debt to the entire universe, and they were prepared to pay it regardless of the cost. The galaxy was about to discover that when humans owed you a debt, the repayment could reshape the very nature of civilization itself. The command center aboard the Alliance flagship Unity buzzed with controlled tension as Operation Gratitude entered its final phase. Captain Vexai stood beside Admiral Chun at the central holographic display, watching as hundreds of status indicators showed the simultaneous assault on 47 hegemony star systems. What they were witnessing was unprecedented in galactic history, a coordinated military action designed not to conquer or destroy, but to liberate and heal. Phase 1 completion in 30 seconds, reported Commander Reese, the human tactical officer whose cybernetic implants allowed her to process data from multiple fleets simultaneously. All strike teams report successful penetration of hegemony defense networks. The holographic display showed a three-dimensional map of hegemony space, with each targeted system marked by a different colored indicator. Green meant successful disabling of military installations, yellow indicated ongoing operations, and red showed systems where unexpected resistance had been encountered. "Admiral," Vexai said quietly, "the scale of this coordination is remarkable. How are you maintaining real-time communication across such distances?" Chen's expression remained focused on the tactical display, but her voice carried a note of satisfaction. "Quantum entanglement communicators, Captain. one of the technologies human scientists developed after studying alliance databases. We can maintain instantaneous communication regardless of distance. The first green indicators began appearing on the display as human fleets reported successful completion of their objectives. But these weren't traditional military victories. Each green light represented not destruction, but the precise disabling of weapons systems while leaving life support and civilian infrastructure intact. Sir, Commander Reese reported, Fleet 7 reports an interesting development in the Draconis system. The local hegemony forces have surrendered immediately upon realizing our weapons are non-lethal. They're actually requesting assistance in overthrowing their local commanders. Admiral Chin nodded grimly. Dr. Zilfin's intelligence was correct. Most hegemony forces are conscripts who hate their own leadership more than they hate us. Commander, signal Fleet 7 to begin Phase 2 immediately. Those beings have been suffering under oppression long enough. Phase 2 of Operation Gratitude was perhaps even more ambitious than the military assault. As each hegemony system was secured, massive humanitarian fleets moved in to begin the work of liberation and healing. Hospital ships the size of small space stations carried medical technology specifically designed to reverse genetic modifications. Cultural specialists prepared to help dozens of oppressed species rebuild their social structures. Engineers stood ready to convert military installations into infrastructure for peaceful civilization. Captain, Admiral Chin said, activating a private communication channel, I want you to see something that will explain why humanity considers this operation necessary. The holographic display shifted to show feed from one of the liberated systems. Human medical teams were working alongside Alliance doctors to treat beings who had been genetically modified to be more compliant and less intelligent. The reversal process was complex and dangerous, but the expressions on the faces of those being treated told a story of hope being restored after years of despair. These beings, Chin explained, were modified to be perfect soldiers. Their emotional capacity was reduced, their independent thinking suppressed, their ability to question orders eliminated. We're not just freeing them from military service, Captain. We're giving them back their minds. Vexai watched as a Gorvanian miner, his massive frame shaking with emotion, embraced a human doctor who had just completed his neural restoration procedure. The sight struck him powerfully, reminding him of his own emotional response to rescue situations throughout his career. Admiral, how long will the full restoration process take? For complete psychological and genetic reversal? Anywhere from 6 months to several years, depending on the extent of the modifications. But we're prepared for the long term, Captain. Humanity has committed to staying in these systems until every being who wants treatment has received it. The tactical display continued to show progress across hegemony space. System after system shifted from red through yellow to green as military installations were disabled and humanitarian operations began. But the true scope of human preparation became apparent as the logistics networks activated. Sir, Commander Reese reported, Supply Fleet Alpha has begun distribution of emergency rations adapted for 43 different species physiologies. Fleet Beta is deploying temporary housing modules configured for various environmental requirements. Fleet Gamma is establishing educational centers for beings who have been denied access to knowledge for decades. The level of preparation was staggering. Humanity had not only planned for the military aspects of the operation, but had anticipated every possible need of the liberated populations. Emergency supplies, medical care, education, technology, even entertainment, and cultural programs adapted for species they had never encountered before. Admiral, Vexai said with growing amazement, the resources you've committed to this operation must represent a significant portion of Earth's total industrial capacity. 78%. Chin replied matter-of-factly. Captain, when I was drifting in space, dying slowly from system failures, you diverted your entire ship to save one being you'd never met. Humanity is simply applying the same principle on a larger scale. As the hours passed, the true nature of the hegemony's oppression became clear. System after system revealed populations that had been enslaved, modified, and brutalized by their own government. Entire species had been reduced to biological machines, their creativity and independence stripped away in service of military efficiency. But with each liberation, human medical and psychological teams worked miracles of restoration. Technologies developed specifically for this operation allowed them to reverse modifications that Alliance science had considered permanent. Neural pathways were rebuilt, genetic expressions were restored, and psychological trauma was treated with unprecedented effectiveness. Captain, Dr. Zilfin's voice came through the communications system from the medical ship Asclepius. What the humans have accomplished here exceeds anything I thought possible. They've developed treatments for forms of oppression that we didn't even recognize as treatable. The holographic display showed her working alongside human specialists in a massive medical facility that had been hastily constructed in orbit around a liberated world. Thousands of beings were receiving treatment simultaneously, their minds and bodies being restored to their natural states. Dr. Vexai responded, "How is such rapid treatment possible?" The humans developed something they call empathic medicine, Captain. Their treatment protocols aren't just designed to cure physical symptoms, but to address the psychological and social aspects of oppression. They're not just healing bodies, they're rebuilding entire concepts of self-worth and independence. As Operation Gratitude progressed, it became clear that humanity's approach to warfare was fundamentally different from anything the galaxy had seen before. Traditional military doctrine focused on defeating enemies and seizing territory. Human doctrine focused on eliminating the conditions that created enemies in the first place. Admiral, Fleet Commander Okafor reported from the Hegemony Capital System. "We've completed securing the central command structure. The Leadership Council has been taken into custody, but we've encountered an unexpected situation." The communication channel shifted to show the interior of the massive Hegemony Command Center. Instead of the militant fanatics they had expected to find, the human forces had discovered a small group of elderly beings, many of them showing signs of the same genetic modifications they had been imposing on their subjects. They've been controlling their entire civilization through automated systems, Commander Okafor explained. The real decision-making has been done by artificial intelligence programs designed to maximize military efficiency and minimize independent thinking. Even the Leadership Council was just following program directives. Admiral Chun studied the images with expression of mixed anger and pity. "Commander, what's the status of those AI systems?" "Shut down permanently, Admiral. We've also discovered the original programming parameters. The entire hegemony structure was designed by a previous civilization that went extinct over 1,000 years ago. These beings have been trapped in a dead culture's vision of perfect order." The implications were staggering. The hegemony hadn't been a case of evil beings choosing to oppress others. It had been an entire civilization trapped in the automated fulfillment of ancient programming, unable to break free from systems designed to perpetuate themselves indefinitely. "Admiral," Vexai said, "this changes the nature of what you've accomplished. You haven't just defeated an enemy. You've freed an entire civilization from artificial control." "Captain, that's exactly what we hope to achieve. Humanity learned something important from our early history with artificial intelligence. We learned that the real enemy is never the beings who are controlled by oppressive systems, but the systems themselves." As the final phases of Operation Gratitude unfolded, the liberated systems began showing signs of remarkable recovery. Beings who had been denied creativity for generations began producing art, music, and literature with explosive enthusiasm. Species that had been isolated from each other began forming new alliances and friendships. Technologies that had been suppressed in favor of military applications began flourishing in civilian applications. "Sir," Commander Reese reported, "we're receiving requests for alliance membership from 31 of the liberated systems. They want to join the galactic community as free civilizations." Admiral Chun smiled, the expression transforming her face with genuine joy. "Grant all requests, Commander, and begin preparation for the transition of our humanitarian fleets to permanent diplomatic and cultural exchange missions." The holographic display shifted to show the final tally of Operation Gratitude's results. 812 million beings liberated from oppression. 47 star systems converted from military dictatorships to free societies. Thousands of technologies and cultural practices restored after centuries of suppression. 0 civilian casualties from military action. "Admiral," Vexai said, his voice heavy with emotion, "what humanity has accomplished here will be remembered for millennia. You've not only ended a war, you've demonstrated a completely new model for for how civilizations can interact. Chun turned from the display to face him directly. Captain, do you remember what you said when I thanked you for rescuing me? Vexai thought back to their conversation aboard the Zephyrian Dawn over a year ago. I told you that helping beings in distress was simply the duty of civilized spacefaring species. Exactly. You didn't save me because you expected a reward, or because it would benefit the Altarian Trade Consortium, or because you had some grand strategic plan. You saved me because it was the right thing to do. She gestured toward the holographic display showing the liberated systems. This operation wasn't humanity's attempt to gain power or territory or strategic advantage. It was our attempt to do the right thing on a galactic scale. We wanted to create a universe where no being would have to face the hopeless situation I was in when you found me. As the command center began transitioning from military operations to humanitarian coordination, Vexai found himself reflecting on the extraordinary chain of events that had led to this moment. His simple decision to rescue a stranded being had resulted in the liberation of nearly 1 billion souls and the transformation of galactic civilization. Admiral, he said, I need you to know something. When I rescued you from that drifting ship, I was simply following principles that every decent being should follow. I never expected anything in return. I know that, Captain. That's exactly why humanity felt obligated to do all this. You taught us that the universe contains beings who will risk everything to help strangers, who value life above convenience or profit. We wanted to prove ourselves worthy of that universe. Chen's expression grew thoughtful as she watched the displays showing reconstruction efforts across the liberated systems. Captain, there's something else I want you to know. This operation isn't the end of humanity's repayment for your kindness. It's the beginning. What do you mean? We've learned something important about ourselves during this operation. We've learned that humans are at our best when we're helping others, when we're protecting beings who can't protect themselves. We're going to keep doing this, Captain. Wherever there's suffering we can alleviate, wherever there's oppression we can end, wherever there are beings who need the kind of help you gave me. The implications of Chen's words struck Vexai with sudden clarity. Humanity had found its role in the galactic community not as conquerors or traitors or diplomats, but as protectors and liberators. They had taken his simple act of rescue and made it the foundation of their entire civilization's purpose. Admiral, he said, you're talking about transforming humanity into the galaxy's guardian species. Captain, we're talking about transforming the galaxy into a place where guardianship isn't necessary because every species protects every other species. You showed us that such a universe is possible. Now we're going to spend, however long it takes to make it real. As the command center continued its work coordinating the massive humanitarian effort, Vexai realized that he was witnessing the birth of something unprecedented in galactic history. Not just a new military power or political alliance, but a fundamental shift in how civilizations related to each other. The debt that Admiral Chun felt she owed him had become humanity's debt to existence itself. And as the liberated systems began joining the alliance as free and equal members, as formerly oppressed beings began contributing their own unique gifts to the galactic community, it became clear that this debt would reshape the universe in ways that would echo through eternity. Months later, as Captain Vexai resumed his normal trade routes aboard the Zephyrian Dawn, he would often pause to listen to the communications traffic between Alliance worlds. The conversations had changed. Species that had never spoken before were sharing discoveries. Worlds that had been isolated were requesting cultural exchanges. Technologies that had been hoarded were being freely shared for the benefit of all. When humans owed you a debt, the repayment was indeed powerful and unforgettable. But more than that, it was transformative, turning a simple act of kindness into a catalyst for the evolution of galactic civilization itself. The universe had become a place where the rescue of one being could lead to the liberation of nearly 1 billion souls, where the values of one species